Hello. Hi, everyone. So my name is Meagher. I'm here I'm a teacher in the Faculty of Architecture, and it's my great pleasure today to be introducing this group of OER users, OER specialists from all different parts of the university. And I think it speaks very highly to sort of where we are now in our community, that we have such, a group of people who represent such a great sort of depth and breadth of experience within this topic. I mean, in the panel and in the audience. So I think it's a very exciting time for us, an early time, but an exciting time around our adoption of OER at University of Manitoba. And I mean, something that I've thought about myself is sort of why it is that there isn't a broader interest in this topic, or why it is that we don't have a kind of a more I guess extensive adoption of these ideas. Because I mean, to me it seems like they're really it's quite a not so much a niche topic as a really fundamental topic that gets to the core of what we're thinking about and doing as teachers and as researchers at the university. So personally I'm very excited to hear from the panelists and about the experiences that they've had. So I just wanted to begin by introducing our panelists today. So I will begin, I guess, and this is where the order comes in, but I will begin with Laura. Dr. Laura Forsythe is a Métis scholar at the University of Winnipeg in the Faculty of Education. Dr. Katherine Davis is a Métis instructor at Asper School of Business. Dr. Xinli Wang is an instructor in the Mathematics department. Dr. Julianne is an instructor in the Linguistics department at the University of Manitoba. And Charlotte Moore is a PhD candidate in Faculty of Education. And I thought, just to start things off, I would start the discussion by asking each of the panelists just to share a project that characterizes their own personal interest and approach to OER and to open education. So perhaps starting with Laura.
One project. Okay, I'll talk about the National Center for Collaboration on Indigenous Education, which created over 80 lesson plans for future educators and educators to use in their classrooms, alongside of a whole myriad of videos and resources for teachers to build their own knowledges that they can also bring into the classroom in a really great way. It was a project that was done over 5 years. It's SSHRC funded and INAC funded. So old it was funded by INAC. And some will get that joke. And so it was by 17 different research projects individually around the country, coast to coast to coast. So I invite you to check that out, because it is what can happen and what is possible when things are properly funded.
Hello, everyone. So just a small correction. I don't have a PhD, so doctor is not well suited for me at this point in my career. But I am an instructor at the Asper School of Business. And as part of my role, I'm teaching the first course called Indigenous Peoples in Canadian Business. And it will be a required course in the new curriculum, undergraduate curriculum. And so as part of that, as I was doing kind of a scan of literature and of textbooks across Canada and business, I started to notice that, I was building and bringing in, articles or videos and even relying on a textbook out of Cape Breton University and looking at different cases. But what I noticed even within our own faculty is there was, similar cases being used. And so what I identified was that, first of all, it is a privilege to be in these institutions, but it's not often open to all people that could be benefiting and should be benefiting from the business education. And so this was an opportunity to see, applying for this OER project, bringing in Indigenous voices into a space where, there isn't a lot of representation in our faculty and even within the management literature itself. So for me, I saw, there's so much excellent work being done across Canada from Indigenous people in different, whether it's Indigenous businesses, and really wanting those to be a part of what students are learning from. So when I was asked to teach the MBA class in the winter term, this term, I thought, okay, well, MBA students, they could talk to Indigenous business leaders, talk to Indigenous owners of running businesses, and hear from them, first as a way of learning to build relationships, but then also to highlight those stories and use those then as a teaching resource within our undergraduate program. And to not only have that confined to and hidden behind closed doors, but to have that available to anyone that is interested in business, and seeing that Indigenous people is not just this deficit narrative, but there is a lot of success being had across the country with Indigenous business. So I'm an early adopter, and I didn't even know the vision I had actually had a title like OER. I'm still learning as I'm going, and I'm very humbled by the presentation today and taking a lot back from Kayla, but that's just a little bit of my project and what I'm working on. So yeah, merci.
Okay, hi everyone. Xinli Wang. I'm a math instructor at the Department of Mathematics here at UM. So a project that kind of taught me everything about OER was one that I did back in 2018, 2019. So I was one of the 5 Open Education Fellows working with eCampus Ontario back then. I was teaching in Ontario at a couple of different institutions at that time. So I was teaching at U of T on UTM campus. I was also teaching at Seneca College and Harper College at the same time. So, and when this opportunity came up, I applied and I got it. So during this one whole year project, there were 5 of us, all coming from different institutions in Ontario, who shared one common interest, which is open education. So we learned everything about open education resources, open education practices. We also learned some very practical skills when it comes to developing open education resources. So I actually, through this one-year fellowship, learned how to do a website of my own. So my personal webpage right now was developed back then when I was part of this program. And I also learned about Pressbooks platform. That's where I adapted my first open textbook in linear algebra. So that's one of the courses I was teaching back then. We were already using an open textbook for that course, but we didn't have a customized version. So that book has about 12 chapters, and we teach half out of these 12 chapters. So I thought it might be a good idea for me to adapt the book and just put all the topics that we include in our course together. So I did that, and I had a research assistant who worked with me on that project. I also got some funding support from UTM. That was the first time on campus when this grant was made available, and then it was run every year from then on to encourage people to work on this particular field. So I would say after completing this textbook, I did learn quite a lot about how wonderful it is if educators ourselves can decide what we teach, how to teach stuff, and in the future, if there's any change that's needed, we can just go there and change it right there and right then. And also involving students in this particular project makes it more fun and interesting in the sense that I do get to learn about what my students care when it comes to learning linear algebra. Because my research assistant was kind of in charge of putting all the interactive practice problems together in this book. So I had his perspective in the sense that what kind of questions or problems students want to see in this book. So that was really interesting. But also, by the end of this project, so of course, it's like almost a year later, it took much longer than what I thought. I thought, well, 4 months, give it at most 6 months, I'll get it done. No. So if anyone is thinking about maybe adapting or writing our first education, well, open textbook, for example, give yourself maybe a bit more time than what you thought you might need, maybe a good idea, or just start small from, instead of one whole book, maybe one section of your course, that's a good start. There's no shame for not getting everything done at one go. It's totally fine. And then after this, I discovered that there's actually other platforms out there, especially for mathematics, that might work better than Pressbooks. So that's my next project. So I'm working on developing another book on a platform that's called Pretext. And this platform, the final product, will look much, much more beautiful in terms of mathematics display than Pressbooks. So I'm excited of getting that done and getting that book out.
Thank you. So my name is Julie Donor, and I am on a 1-year contract with the Department of Linguistics here, developing pedagogical resources. And one of the top projects I'm working on is a textbook for one of our second-year courses. And it will be an OER textbook on Pressbooks. And so some of my goals for this textbook are to be intentional about, so it's a linguistics course, so there'll be a lot of examples from a variety of languages throughout the book, and I want to be intentional about which varieties I include, including non-standard varieties, indigenous languages, signed languages, and languages that represent our international students as well. One of my other goals is to format the linguistic data and the technical diagrams in a way that's accessible to screen readers and accessible for all sorts of students. And this is actually a surprisingly big challenge. There doesn't seem to be any established best practices for the linguistic-specific diagrams and data, and how to format those in a way that's accessible. One of our other goals is to center issues of social justice and ethical research practices throughout, to have like decolonial, to have like a critical review of the past historical practices and how they happen in a colonial framework, and help students question those. And then also to scaffold hidden curriculum and writing in the discipline of linguistics in the textbook. So yes, these are lots of goals, and it's a huge job, and it's a 1-year contract, so I won't make it. But those are my goals.
Hello, my name is Charlotte, and I come here from a bit of a different perspective because I am not working in a classroom at this moment. Instead, I am working with a different type of open educational resource. And just for funsies, I want you to raise your hand if you have ever gone to the website Wikipedia. Thank you. Okay, wonderful. So Wikipedia is the largest open educational resource in the world. It was started in the early 2000s, I believe, maybe late 1990s, as specifically a way to make more knowledge available to more people. I just sort of stumbled into editing Wikipedia. I don't exactly, my first thing I think was noticing like a few word choices that I'm like, ooh, I don't quite like the way that's worded. And there's even something today that I'm in a bit of a twitch with somebody about the difference between difference and deficit. Language when talking about autism. So one of the things I just started working with it, and then as I got more invested in editing Wikipedia, learned more about the systemic biases that exist. So the average Wikipedia editor is between the ages of 20 and 30. They're also a white man living in the United States or the United Kingdom.
And therefore, most of the articles on Wikipedia are of interest to those people. The most recent data said that 17% of all biographies are of women. And so there's a huge project of trying to increase biographies for women. And even worse, of the biographies available up for deletion, 41% of them were women. This was exemplified in 2018 by Donna Strickland, who won the Nobel Prize in Physics. And at that time, her Wikipedia page had been deleted multiple times as she was considered not notable, according to the guidelines. So at the time that she won the Nobel Prize, she was not notable. So this has really gotten my interest going, trying to work a lot. I have created over 450 pages, mostly looking at women and LGBT folks, and often related to literature because that is my background. I'm also do some work in the background of looking at new pages as they are created. One of the things that I've gotten more interested in lately is also bringing Wikipedia into the classroom to have students creating Wikipedia pages, and Wikipedia has its own wiki education program that basically walks professors and teachers through the process of asking their students to create pages. They have like an entire 12-week curriculum with its own dashboard of like how to grade and put like assignment guidelines and all of like for photo assignments, lots of different things. So that's something I've been more interested in recently, and something that I created my own curriculum for a course of like a 15-week first-year writing class. That is not available, I've never done it. I want to in the future, but those are some of the things that I have been interested in that, yeah, I fit on the panel. Very different from everybody else, I feel. Or do you want to take mine, or?
Sure, thanks, Charlotte. Yeah, thanks very much, everyone. I thought, to follow up on those comments, I thought it would be interesting to have a discussion about one dimension of OER, which is I suppose the benefits for students of OER, because I think we often hear about the financial benefits, which are significant and critical. I mean, the financial benefits in terms of the cost of textbooks, but it's clear from what all of you have been saying that the benefits also go far beyond that. And I was interested to hear from people about what your overall thoughts were about, in your experience, what are some of the key learning opportunities that arise from use of OER?
One of the projects that I have been able to work on here at the University of Manitoba is the creation of the distance education learning courses for Indigenous Studies, Part 1 and Part 2, which means every year between 1,000 and 1,500 people take these courses. And so not buying a textbook was really important to me, but not only because of the fact that a textbook is expensive, but it also is outdated the moment it is printed. And so especially in Indigenous Studies, which is ever evolving. And so the freedom to be able to create courses that are reliant on the work of others, absolutely, that are published in spaces that we can utilize in the classroom, but then cycle out if they are found to be problematic for various reasons in Indigenous Studies. It means that the learners in these classes, when they come to this mandatory course, are going to have the most up-to-date information about Indigenous Studies and the complexities of it. In an environment where it can change depending on how they're taking in that information. I might program something in the cycle that I think is going to hit a certain way, and perhaps it doesn't. And so then that gives us the opportunity to be reactive of what's happening in the classroom when we run it the next time. And so we ran the pilot project in fall. It was the first offering of 1220. And we had 800 students take it at that time, so we got a pretty good sense of how it was hitting and how people were taking it up and how people were reacting to it, and we're really happy with it. But over time that might change. I mean, we only change our courses every 5, 7, actually we haven't done it in 20 years. And so it gives us opportunity to be able to make small adjustments with incoming instructors for the benefit of their learning overall. in a free way as well. I'm really big on saving money for students, but I think there's a way that it also enhances their learning.
I think there's some really neat opportunities and challenges for accessibility. A paper textbook, if a student is blind, it either has to be read out loud or it has to be translated to Braille, for example. But an online textbook can be you can just use a screen reader on it. You can embed videos, you can embed multimedia exercises. Again, those have additional accessibility challenges, but also opportunities together. So that's one of the ways I see it benefiting students as well. And then the fact, and this is a benefit for me as well, the fact that I can bring it up like on my phone. So I'm like out and people are like, what do you do? And I can like show them. I'm like, give them an actual example. So that's also another benefit.
Yeah, so when I heard that question, I thought back to when I was a student. And when I was a student, whether it was an art student in global political economy or at the Asper School of Business doing my MBA, I didn't see myself in the stories or in cases. It wasn't very common to see Indigenous perspectives being told by Indigenous people. And so I think primarily, like when we look at, although many of the students aren't Indigenous in my classes right now, there are a few. And so it's nice, I think, to be able to have the diversity of Indigenous leaders being seen. And that helps to bridge, again, that kind of narrative that's out there that Indigenous people are, all the negative stereotypes. So I think that having something that's Indigenous-led, student-led, it really gets students that are learning in this class involved and seeing the relevance and current, cases and stories to be told. So that's one thing that I see as of benefit. And, I had another point, but I can't remember, so I'll leave it there for now. Yeah.
All right, so I'll kind of jump back just thinking about my first introduction to Wikipedia, which was probably high school, start of university, and the conversations I remember were very much like the conversations that are happening now about ChatGPT, of like, you can't trust this is awful. And there was this ongoing prank at my high school to change the name of our principal, who had a very 80s hairstyle, to one of the band members of Whitesnake. And it was one of these learning experiences, actually, because the page, within an hour, it would be updated, and the page was eventually locked, so that only certain users could edit it. And that happened maybe in like 3 days of this being perpetually vandalized. So I think there's a really interesting thing of using, both just talking about Wikipedia in your classroom, because students are using it. I use it all the time. I think it is a great jumping off point when you don't understand a topic to go like, okay, what in the world is this? And get started there. And then teaching students how to use a resource such as that. So things should be cited on Wikipedia, and to say, hey, look at these citations. If you go down, what type of citations are those? Are those journal articles? And we are trying to find more open access journal articles. There's a little bot that we use to try to find open access versions of articles. Are they journal articles? Are they websites? So you can have conversations about digital literacy and media literacy of like, what are these sources? Are they valuable sources? And then when we start talking to students about creating, we can also, all of the research skills and writing skills that are valuable for any type of writing course are still there. And then you have an added thing of community and collaborative writing, because again, anybody can jump in, and you have to leave edit summaries saying, oh, I deleted this, here's why. It might not be relevant, or the source was bad. A lot of time, my work as a cleanup person is looking at the 15 sources somebody has put at the end of a sentence and saying, these are all trying to sell the product. These are not valuable sources. And sometimes it's just a store trying to make themselves look good, and all of the all the sources that they provide are trying to sell them. And we say, no, you are not actually a notable store. So yeah, you go into this conversation of like, what is a good source? And how do you collaborate with other writers? And then of course, all your normal like writing type skills. I think those are like some of the key points of both coming at writing articles and kind of using it as a media literacy and how to talk about how to use Wikipedia. Because there are ways to use it really well, and then there's ways to not use it so well. Oh, wait, you want to? Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to say, by the way, I didn't say at the beginning, but yeah, please, everyone, feel free to stop me at any time and jump in with questions for the panel or just with comments or things you would like to discuss, and from the online audience as well. Yeah, we'd like to invite everyone to participate. One thing that I found really fascinating with the talk, with Kayla Larson's talk just now, was this question around, I guess, which was quite central to what she was talking about, around the question of openness and what openness means in the context of education, or what are some of the positive and also the negative dimensions of making knowledge open. And I was thinking about sort of multiple ways in which openness is a positive thing in terms of say access to knowledge, in terms of providing, say, more equitable access to post-secondary education, in terms of giving the students also the idea of contributing to their disciplines, contributing to the expansion of knowledge and understanding in their fields, but also how the internet is not always a friendly place, and exposing the students to that is not always something that we can feel comfortable with, and you know, also there's an aspect of not all knowledge needs to be shared everywhere. And so I just was wondering about that question of how all of you have negotiated this question of openness and how open to be, I guess, in your teaching.
So this is something that I just reflected on in the last half an hour, okay? So, you know, I'm going to be open in my answer here, but it's can evolve and it can change, okay? But for me, if you think of a circle, okay, and this is, you know, teachings within Indigenous knowledges of circle, it's not as though the circle has to stay stagnant to something that's here. It can grow. The circle can grow. It can evolve. It can become more expansive. And so I think from what I took away from Kayla's talk, and something that I've reflected on even within my own OER journey here, is that I don't have all the answers. I'm not the person of holding all knowledge. And it requires me to expand my relationships, bring in people into circles that can speak to you know, knowledges with their permission, and that element of consent, and you know, ensuring that people's voices are heard and respected, and knowing what those boundaries of the circle are. So when we think of openness from the sense of no boundary or no container, and it's just, you know, the sense of chaos, that's one thing. But to know that, you know, if I have a container like this, that it can grow, it can, you know, move. And so I think knowing what we are trying to bring into the circle of what is the conditions for that to be nurtured within that, and then, you know, versus being able to continue to iterate it in a good way with the people that are involved. So, yeah.
When I was at Kayla's talk in November, and she introduced the Wild Rose model there, she talked about, well, what do you do with a rose that's missing a petal? It's still beautiful. Like, yeah, you want to strive for one with all 5 petals, but it doesn't have to be perfect for it to be valuable and valued. So that's also a helpful thing that I'm going to bring up. that she didn't say this time.
I just had like a comment on the using the wiki stuff for learning when I was in university. Sorry, I just had a quick comment on the using the wiki for learning. When I was in university in like 2003, we were learning Icelandic literature, and our professor, he assigned everyone like little blocks of one of the sagas, and we had to translate it to our own language, and everybody there spoke different languages, so it was translated to many different languages. And he had a wiki of it all together, and we had to edit what the students put from last year and improve it. And it was just like this study guide that each year was improving, and by adding notes and references in their own languages and just making it more and more accessible to everyone every year. But that was like 2003. It was a really long time ago, but I just wanted to share it. Thanks.
And thinking about allowing things to be open and open access, I'll tell you, so I have the privilege to have been an editor for a very long time, have quite a few collections. And yes, our first collection is in Harvard. That's wonderful. But how many people actually get to read it? It was $75 to buy those. Some people in the audience are in that book. And how many people get to read it? Versus now, in the last year, we've started 2 open access journals that our aunties can share and read and be very proud of everyone who's in it and share it into communities. So it's not just us learning about Métis things in Powatimek, or indigenous scholars and people who work in Indigenous studies reading from the Canadian Journal of Indigenous Studies. It's anyone and everyone who's getting an opportunity to learn those things, and teachers can bring them into their classrooms, and people can share them. And so I don't know what is negative about open, and I'm sure it'll come around back to me, but right now I'm just really excited about people getting to see things that they normally would not get to see in K-12 education or in post-secondary education, even if they did pay the price to go to the library, right? And so I'm really excited about that.
Thanks. I just want to add a comment. I think the extent to which the particular knowledge could, how much open it could go, also depends on the knowledge itself. So I come from the discipline of mathematics, and I personally believe mathematics knowledge should be as open as it could be. And also, mathematicians have already set up this model of sharing the knowledge. There's a website that's called Archive. So any math paper that we have seen in today's journals, open access, all closed door. So all of those papers were first posted onto Archive, free access for everybody who has access to internet. So mathematicians have been doing this for decades. In other words, if anyone wants to learn a particular math knowledge, wants to read a particular math paper, it's always there, free access. The only possible difference between these papers and the published one is probably just how nice they look. Yeah, so as a math educator, I also believe in openness, and I do think there's nothing that should be there that hinder my students' learning, that should prevent this math knowledge from getting out to the public. But other disciplines, indigenous knowledge, they're of different nature, so I think that's something that's worth discussing, especially for people from those fields. I think it really, really depends on the context. But I'm glad that mathematics is an open field.
I guess I can say just one thing, thinking about the information that is included as well. This kind of goes into the idea of the information potentially being pushed out for individual wellness. So the example that came to mind, especially thinking about biographies of living people, that something bad happening to somebody can end up being on their biography on Wikipedia. So that the example that I'm thinking of, there was a ballet dancer with the Boston Ballet, and she had a Wikipedia page in her own right as a ballet dancer and as a model, but she was also involved as a victim of abuse in a large scandal that went to the New York Times and several other large publications. As such, the scandal itself was notable because it was being covered in a lot of large publications. It wasn't local news, it was nationwide news. And therefore, her Wikipedia page, almost 2/3 of it is about her being a victim of abuse. And there's not a lot of information you can add to it to talk about her modeling or her ballet dancing, because there's not as much coverage of that. So we get into this awkward area of it shouldn't be removed because it has adequate coverage. But there's also the harm in that anybody looking for her, even 10 years in the future, she is going to be continuously marked by this time in her life. So that's one of the hard things that we kind of have to deal with. One of those, we are living in the world of the internet. Anything that happens to you can be public knowledge. Anything you put out there can be public knowledge. Yeah.
Just kind of a comment. Oh gosh, vote again. I'm still processing all of this in my mind, so perhaps it's not going to come out very nicely. But in thinking about, I was thinking about the comments around like Indigenous protocols and knowledge, and what I really liked in the keynote, and perhaps you also really liked, was that discussion about like, we only share some stories in the winter, and so like, do we give those protocols? Do we like insert sounds of like crunching snow? And then thinking about too, how like now so many Indigenous communities are using like video games and podcasts to make sure that knowledge continues to be transferred. I'm just thinking about like the possibilities, like we evolve all the time, like we have to, that's how Indigenous people survive, we adapt. And like, what does that mean in OERs? Like, how do we continue to adapt our protocols? Like, we obviously, like, probably are not pulling back curtains and giving away the inner workings of ceremony, but like how, yeah, I'm just still processing, as I said, like, how do we continue to adapt those protocols and share knowledge in a good way and make sure that it gets to be shared, you know, but doing it in ways that are good. Big question.
Thanks a lot for the presentations. I think it's great to hear about just the wide range of approaches to how you're all engaging with open publishing and OERs. My question is about how something built for, or that has the possibility of reaching a wide audience, a community audience, how it circles back and how it functions within the university. Would be great to hear your insights on peer review, on how how your OERs function within the tenure and promotion world, how they're received at the department level. I think open publishing is it's experimental, it's changing, and you know, I think peer review needs to change with it. What that looks like is still an open question.
So I'll just maybe, because Micheline, it was a comment and kind of question as well, which was quite.
I want to know.
Yeah, and then with Glenn's question there. So I think, I mean, I don't have a definitive answer, but I think I'll just go back to my analogy at the beginning as well, in just terms of the expansion and the fact that it's living. You know, if the way I envision just the process in which this OER project evolves is that it kind of grows with the class, and so it's really about students and instructor and even people that are involved in stories or business cases kind of working together. And so within my class in particular, It's really about students understanding that because I think how I've seen subjects being taught as Indigenous people as subjects, right? And rather than people seeing themselves as a subject to reflect on, to engage in process of this expanding topic of reconciliation and what that means. And so if we're truly putting leading through our hearts, leading through these values of engaging in reconciliation, then that's how I see this kind of evolving through and with Indigenous people. So I guess that's my attempt at answering a question that I think will continue to be asked, which is an important one to ask. And Glenn, your question, I think I'm fortunate in that I'm an instructor and not actually, even though I'm part of the faculty, I'm an instructor, and so it is my job to be promoted through curriculum development. So I'm sure my other colleagues here might have a different answer, and but I think that's I'm fortunate in that sense that this is part of what I need to show in order to continue through my promotion at the university. So.
Okay, I'll come in with mine. Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? You're literally behind the screen. So I didn't realize. Were you going to start talking, Charlotte?
No.
Okay, so all I was going to say about open knowledge, you don't teach I don't teach my kids when they're 4 about something they maybe shouldn't know until they have more maturity. So open access maybe should just be the same as when you're ready, which is what we do as Indigenous folks, right? You don't tell somebody something. I don't need to know how to build, oh, maybe I shouldn't say that word on the university campus. I don't need to know how to build a rocket immediately and understand how plutonium works, let's say, until I actually understand all the safety stuff behind it. So that's just my comment.
I've had the opportunity to work and lift up about 170 scholars and community members and publish them in one way or another. And none of them have ever shared a story they weren't supposed to share. I've never had that feedback. I've never, as Indigenous people, we know what we're allowed to share through our own protocols depending on our nations and the things that we've been taught. And there's always retractions if someone tells you a story. I guess if it ever does happen, there's a retraction. So I'm not overly worried about sharing things I'm not supposed to share. I'm more worried about people not knowing what they need to know. And the work that so many people are doing. And even in all of the OERs I have been involved with to this point, there is always a peer review process. We can't take for granted. Even the work that I've done needs to be reviewed by others to ensure that we are lifting up our ways of knowing in a good way. And if my institution at the time of tenure, I don't know, we'll see, Glenn, I'll let you know. If they decide that because no one paid for it, that it isn't valid, we'll have a long conversation, I think, at that point, because truth be known, our open access journals have more access to individuals and eyeballs than anything I've ever published in something that was behind a locked door that the university had to pay for. And so I think that we do absolutely have to adapt to this new world, this new age of open access. SSHRC has adapted to that. You don't get SSHRC funding for your journal unless it is open access. So there's definitely that on our side, I guess, as academics and in publishing open access things, because there's definitely a recognition that we need things to be available beyond, Pembina Highway. So thanks for that question.
I'd like to respond to Glenn's question as a precariously employed early career academic. So I do not think it's going to get me a tenure track traditional job. My work on OERs is not gonna hurt directly, but it's going to hurt in that I only have so much time, and if I'm spending it on this, I'm not spending it on research. But that problem, yeah. So there's that. It does help me get teaching stream positions, like the job I'm in right now is, I wouldn't have got it if I hadn't fallen into open education. But those are less valued in the community, and there are fewer of them, and they are usually less paid and less secure. So And I've been thinking here, and I'm not counting Mark because you're a facilitator, not a panelist, but I've been thinking about the fact that this panelist is all women, and thinking that that also is related to some of the systematic biases in academia. I think the stats show that teaching stream are more likely to be women and people of color than research stream faculty and staff. So so there's definitely stuff going on there.
And I can definitely add to that as a Wikipedia editor, that it is often not something I talk about with other people. It was like a moment of bravery when I slipped in an introduction to Ivona that I edit Wikipedia in my free time, and she was like, oh my God, we need to talk. Typically, I get one of two responses. One is like, oh, that's so cool. Or one that's like, oh, you cute little child, with a pat on the head. And it is something that I spend a lot of time on. I do not want to admit to this room how much time I spend on Wikipedia. But it's something that I have questioned. Is this even something I put on my CV? Is this something I put on my resume? Because most people do not see Wikipedia as an academic endeavor by any means. And as Julie said, like, this interferes with my research time as a PhD candidate. I'm currently working on my proposal, and it is completely separate. My research is in neurodivergent graduate students and their experiences in higher education. And that seems completely separate from Wikipedia, but my ADHD is part of the reason why I edit Wikipedia. It's very enjoyable. But my supervisor has been thinking, like, how do we merge? Like, how do we merge these two things that you spend a lot of time on? How do we make this something that is valuable to you? Especially thinking about those long term. So yeah, the question is like, no, most people don't see it as valuable, at least my work. And I find it really interesting, the speaker you had recently talking about, you know, what do we do on this systemic level to see open educational resources as more valuable to the university. I know talking about like failure rates in classes because students can't afford textbooks, and withdrawal rates, and students not seeing themselves in the curriculum. There's lots of issues that are addressed by OERs, but the people putting the time and effort into it, interestingly, as Julie said, we are a bunch of women, and women tend to do unpaid labor. So how do we look at it at a systemic level to make it more valuable that we are spending our time on these things? Go ahead.
I don't see Laura, so I'm going to move over. But there are two comments online that I wanted to read out to you, or questions. So Cynthia Costa is asking if there are any other initiatives or projects that you would like to highlight that illustrate challenges or possibilities from your perspectives.
Okay, I'll start. I'm not sure whether everyone in this room is aware there's a project that started in the beginning of the pandemic that's called Equity Unbound. So this is a joint effort between three researchers/educators across these three women. They work in different countries. Mahabali is based in Egypt, and I think the other two collaborators/creators of this website and project are based in the States. So this is an open educational resource in the sense that they have put together a list of activities for engaging students when we first moved online, and this project is still growing today. And if you haven't had a chance to check it out, go there. It's called Equity Unbound. It will give you many, many fantastic ideas about engaging students in general. And I also believe behind this project, it shows the core value behind openness.
A I mean, this is for the K-12 teachers in the house, but those who want to do educating in Indigenous studies or Indigenous topics and perspectives, I think maybe we're ahead of the game maybe on open access. Everything is open, right? Having to go to teacher paid teachers is very strange to do Indigenous resource things. And so here in Manitoba, we have Full Circle, which just put out an incredible powwow guide that has videos and teaches anybody who wants to know about protocols of powwows and how to be in that space. And it has videos and curriculum for adults, for children. That was put together by Full Circle. A shout out to Kayla's school, and UBC has the UBC Indigenous Math Network for K-12. So many resources, right? Rupert's Land, so we're going to talk about Alberta Wild Roses. Let's talk about Rupert's Land Institute that has so much materials on Métis ways of knowing and being and script and everything you thought you wanted to know about Métis stuff. They have on their website with videos and lesson plans. Like, there's so many opportunities that we maybe overlook because they aren't in a specific textbook, but that are open and accessible and for us to learn from, done by Indigenous people, vetted by Indigenous elders, and ready to use and learn from. So those are some that I can think of off the top of my head.
Thank you. Okay, so the other question from Chelern McKee. I love the observation about the initial biases in Wikipedia creations. I'm wondering how any of you are addressing the technological biases ingrained in the digital structures when supporting Indigenous content.
Can you just repeat the question again? Sorry, I'm just still processing the question.
All right. I'm wondering if or how any of you are addressing the technological biases ingrained in the digital structures when supporting Indigenous content.
Sorry, are we talking about like algorithms? Like, is that what we mean? I don't even.
What is technological?
What? I don't know if I'm technologically literate enough to understand the question. I just, yeah. I think my mind just goes to algorithms, right? Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
But I don't know if I have an answer yet. I just have to reflect on that a bit.
But yes, Carolyn says yes.
Okay.
Well, I think one thing is that our reading lists are curated, so it's not like, so as an instructor, it's your job to curate a list that doesn't have those biases in it. I'm also designing my textbook so that it can be printed and accessible in print format as well, which is a problem at because we don't have a print center anymore on campus, but you can still get it printed, it's just there's extra hoops for other technological biases. Like, some people read better on paper.
And just to think, I know the question sort of started with a wiki, it sounded like. Part of that is there are groups specifically looking at improving Indigenous information. It was shocking to me that the Wikipedia page for the seven grandfathers teaching was super bare. So just providing like a little bit of information on that. I know personally I have created, I know I'm coming from a literature background, so creating several pages for books. I know, like, I'm from Michigan, so like Firekeeper's Daughter, I don't know how well read it was here. Yes, okay, yeah, Firekeeper's Daughter. It had a very big point, but it didn't have a Wikipedia page. The author also didn't have a Wikipedia page. And those were things of like, oh, and there's several of just like, I'm like, wait, this is a very large author, and like Anishinaabe authors, who do not have Wikipedia pages, even though they've published several like best-selling books. So yeah, just going through and creating those as possible. Just, we need a lot more people to go in and create content for historically, systemically, and systematically marginalized people.
My answer is just really simple, and I'll definitely reflect on it more, but I think just having it present and respecting the protocols in which community you work with, and having it present helps with it being, accessible. Now, so yeah, from the technological side, I guess it's something to look into more, but the fact that there's just a lack of representation in some ways perhaps just skews this algorithm to in different ways, right? So, but yeah, thank you for the question.
Yes.
Thanks. So one thing that I've noticed in the university is that a lot of the time they're quite concerned with getting like a certain curve for the grades. And one thing that's popped into my mind is that with OER, students might be more prompted to look at the textbooks beforehand because they don't have to pay for them. And this is more of a university problem than an OER problem. But I was wondering if anyone had thoughts about that.
If everyone at this institution wanted to start reading about Indigenous stuff, just so they could know it before they came to my class, I'd be really happy about it.
Sounds like we'd get happier students if they know what they're signing up for before they sign up for it.
Also, it's being able to read something and getting people up to the informational knowledge that they need to be in order to engage critically with content is much different. So in some of the cases right now, I don't even have students reading the readings before class. So if they can do that in advance and we can have deeper conversations and have much more engaging learning, that's awesome. I would love that. So yeah.
I just want to add one thing. There is research that has been done that investigates the effectiveness of students using open textbook versus commercially published textbook in mathematics, and students do better.
I will just add, if I think there's an issue if professors are also saying like, I need my students to fit a certain curve, that there have to be a certain number of B students, A students, whatever. I taught university writing for 6 years. During that time, my students often said, this is a hard class. I make it difficult. But most of the students got A's at the end of the term. And they were proud of themselves for getting through it. The few students, it was like, I remember for some years, I'd have 20 students in a class. It was 18 students with A's and 2 students with D's because they just didn't do anything. I think overall, the goal of teaching and learning is learning. Yeah, if students are reading, as everybody has said, if students are reading the textbook, awesome. Like, I want them to learn. That's what I care about.
Okay, well, the time has flown by. It's been really a pleasure for me to hear from this amazing panel, and I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for coming, and thank you so much to the panel for joining and for sharing your ideas. So, thank you.